Iniciar. Buenos días nuevamente. Agradecemos a los asistentes a ocupar sus puestos porque vamos a iniciar. Gracias por estar en el seminario Retos de la energía global y el transporte marítimo en el contexto del cambio climático. Siguiendo con nuestro programa, presentamos la exposición El reto global de la energía y el cambio climático a cargo de nuestro primer invitado internacional, el señor Bernard Monod, presidente de Navy Blue Consulting en Francia y socio global con OPES Oceanie. Con una larga trayectoria, el señor Monod ha trabajado con partes interesadas de todo el mundo, abarcando estrategias, relaciones externas, gestión de plantas, finanzas, seguridad legal, organización y sostenibilidad. Navy Blue Consulting es miembro del clúster marítimo francés. Agradecemos al señor Bernard y le damos la bienvenida.
Señoras, es un honor hablar en frente tan distinguido público, pero mi español no es tan bueno y mejor les hablo en inglés. So we can address the climate change, global energy challenge and climate change. So the basic question is definitely which world we want to live in the future, and this is a question for people who are going to live until 2015 and after. So the question to raise are some about opposition, acceptability of climate change versus climate skepticals, economic growth versus frugality or economic decline, sustainability and use of resources versus biodiversity management, and energy production versus consumption. So I'm not pretending to answer this question during this presentation, but it's just to give you some highlights and fuel the reflection and the path of reflections. So the challenge on the climate change could be summarized in this chart. The first chart is the world population. So today, we are around, in 2020, we are around 7.3 billion of inhabitants on this planet, and we are expecting to be 10 billion around 2050. And there is no way to change this trend. You know that we were just out of a huge pandemic, and we had all the pharmaceutical measure to counter this disease. So this figure of 10 billion is quite likely to be obtained in 2050. If you want to continue to provide economic development for all these people, there will be different scenarios for the consumption of energy. These scenarios are driven by the IPCC, the International Panel of Climate Change, so maybe you have heard of this. It's a group of international experts who are able to set up a dozen or more scenarios in terms of consumption of energy and the way to produce safe and reliable energy. So there is different scenarios in the ICPP panels, and unfortunately, every time you are producing energy, you are also producing CO2 and greenhouse gases. And the purpose is to try to decrease this carbon footprint of this emission and at the same time to have this energy. And we have, you know, this target, which is not to be beyond the plus 1.5 degrees of increase of the global temperature on the planet, which is more or less possible or not, depending on the measures we are all globally taking in our countries and our companies. So, just to come into the more detail on the production, there is a link between development and energy production. And if we consider all the means to get raw electricity, you have the first one, the third one, petrol, coal, petrol, and natural gas, which are among 65%, and these are fossil fuels. And the problem of this is indeed the release of greenhouse gases. And then you have nuclear, which is a small green. There's a lot of green. Nuclear, hydroelectricity, solar and wind, which are developing very fast in different countries, and then some part for biomass. The share of electricity have evolved since 1974 after the first oil crisis, and then you see that the coal has decreased dramatically, but it's still in use, and you have a lot of countries which are using coal because they have coal in their ground. Country like China, South Africa, Poland, and Australia, and others. The hydroelectricity is quite stable because it's difficult in terms of acceptability, to have more sites to be equipped in dams, and the gas has increased dramatically as well. And since 2020, the new development have been set up in the wind and solar panel to provide electricity as well. So there is a lot of efforts since this time, but now the carbon and the fossil fuels are on the target to reduce their carbon footprints, because if you check at the share of electricity, if you check at the life cycle greenhouse gas emissions, you can see that here it's a ton of CO2 per gigawatt hour, and you can see that the bad guys are on the left-hand side, you know, with the lignite, carbon, coal, oil, and natural gas, which are emitting a lot of greenhouse gases, as the other way of produce electricity, like nuclear, solar, hydroelectricity, biomass, and wind, are very less emitting greenhouse gases. So, if you want to tackle the climate change, we need to check that the power generation, it's about 40% of energy-related CO2 emission, and electricity is increasingly used to meet end users' demand. So you know that there is not only the power generation, because in the panel of activities we are generating greenhouse gases. You have also the transport, you have agriculture, you have industry, and so forth. But the power generation is quite close to half of the energy-related CO2 emission. And that's why the United Nations have taken this in account, and this is designed in the Sustainable Development Goal number 7, which wants to ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. And this, in that respect, and due to our background, we support what Professor Václav Smil from Manitoba University said, that nuclear energy it's a viable partner to provide commercially proven non-fossil high-power density alternative, which is needed to fuel the future economic development. Because for the moment, we have still 10% of the global population, we have no access to electricity, and we will see how it's demanding for this kind of population not to have access to the electricity. And where are these people? They are mostly in the southern hemisphere, mainly on sub-Saharan Africa, India, and sub-Asiatic continent, and Far East, so Southeast Far East, and some of them in Latin America. So here where these people are without access to electricity. And you have not access to electricity, by the way, you will have to have access to the global internet use. You know that the world population is divided in two parts. You have what we call the digital natives, so people who were born inside the digital world, and digital migrant, like me, for example, we were born in another world without virtual and digital equipment, and there is also a generation gap related to the access to the internet. So you can see there that North America, Europe, Latin America, Caribbean, Middle East are quite well equipped in terms of internet use, but not for everybody. And sorry, and Asia and Africa, indeed, because of the lack of electricity, but also for other reasons, are not equipped. And it's difficult now. You should know that in the normal life to have access to any services if you are not connected to the internet. Meanwhile, all these efforts has driven to reduce constantly the global poverty, and today we are still 10% of the population which is under the threshold of poverty according to the UN standards. So, how to deal with this? To deal with this, it's to get a lot of indicators to help to understand the situation. The United Nations has defined what they call the Human Development Index, which is a basket of indicators in which you have the gross national products, which was in use before, but now they have added new indicators like the life the life expectancy, the educational level, the adult literacy index, and so forth. So this basket of indicators give this human development index. So you can see in a lot of countries here. So you can see that Panama is ranking in 57, which is the first quarter, which is quite a good result, which is the first quarter of the list. And you have indeed, at the end of the list, some very poor countries located in India or in the South American continent, South African continent. And if you link this Human Development Index with the energy consumption, you get a very interesting chart. Here you have the Human Development Index and the energy consumption, which is energy per kilo of oil per capita. So how many kilo of oil per capita you need to get this Human Development Index? And you can see that if you go until 3 tons of 3 tons of oil per capita index, you will get a Human Development Index around 0.8 or 0.9. But all those countries which are on the other side of the chart, into Norway or the US, finally they are wasting energy because you could have the same result with only 3 tons of oil per capita. So there is a big effort in such countries to come back to a more stringent use of energy. So, okay, so now let's go to the green economy, and we are to define which environmental factor are influencing green electricity supply. So you have here what is called green electricity supply. We can discuss on if natural gas is a green energy, but it's a long debate about this. But for all this way to produce electricity, we have defined some different environmental factors, as greenhouse gas emission, land impacts, waste management, direct wildlife impact, transport, and so forth. So for every of these factors, you have an influence on the green electricity production. And so you can relate one to another. That's for environmental factors. And then you can have the same for technical factors. So I want to deal with that kind of green electricity supply consideration, because for all this kind of way to produce electricity, you have this consideration on the technical reliability, load efficiency, technical maturity, public acceptance and price, impact of other industries and so forth. So we don't have time to do this now, but you can relate every of these way to produce electricity with this consideration on electricity supply. And to finish my presentation, I will just underline something about, you can hear in some debates a lot of people saying that we have just only one planet, we have to stop the economic development, we are going to spoil the biodiversity, and so forth. That could be maybe a good idea, but you should remember that there is a lot of people who are not, we are not in this way. For example, 700 million of people are living under the threshold of poverty. We show that 800 million are living without electricity. Also, 2 billion of inhabitants have no safe drinking water, and I want to underline the efforts driven by the Panama Canal Authority to provide safe water for the Panamanian population, and in the meantime trying to preserve the draft of the ships to allow the free and safe shipment in the canal. So it's really this problem of drinking water is a very, very difficult issue. Still, you have 1.7 billion of people without private toilets, which seems to be not a detail for these people. Again, 3 billion no access to internet. And meanwhile, just outside of this this gap, you still have 285 million of children without access to school. And amongst these, we know that there is at least 200 million of girls who have not access to school. So I don't want to kill the ambience with these figures, but to the end of my presentation, according to our backyard, to our background, we are promoting nuclear energy at least. But if I want to refer to Mr. Orojio's presentation this morning, we still think that innovation will be the key for the future in nuclear, and my colleague will explain what we are doing in terms of innovation in the future, but also for other ways to develop the best way to provide economic growth. So for this nuclear power plant, nuclear power should be part of the energy mix. That's why the conclusion of the ICCP panel, because at the very beginning they were quite reluctant to talk about nuclear energy for different reasons. We can maybe explain during the panel. But also they came to the conclusion that nuclear power should be part of the energy mix because of it provides reliable base load electricity for sustainable economic growth. It's also climate friendly, and it could protect the environmental diversity. So we will have next to my presentation a presentation focused on nuclear energy, and I look forward to have some questions during the panel afterwards. Thank you very much.
Agradecemos al señor Monod por su presentación y les recordamos que sus preguntas serán recopiladas por nuestro personal, ya que luego de esta presentación pasaremos al panel. Para cerrar esta primera parte de conferencias, contamos con otra experta internacional, la señora Ann Presta, quien disertará sobre la energía nuclear en el futuro. La señora Presta es la gerente de la Unidad de Relaciones Institucionales de Orano, que es parte de la División de Negocios de Paquetes y Servicios Nucleares del Grupo Orano. Se graduó en Leyes en la Universidad de París, donde obtuvo el título de Derecho y cuenta con una maestría de la Escuela Internacional de Negocios de Cage. Agradecemos a la señora Presta, bienvenida.
Gracias. Buenos días, señoras, señores. Es un placer de estar aquí hoy. Gracias a OPES Oceanie por la invitación. Me encantará de tener la oportunidad de hablar sobre el futuro o la energía nuclear en el futuro. Es un placer de tener la posibilidad de intercambiar conjuntos todo el durante del día. Pero, lo siento mucho, creo que me faltan muchas palabras para hablar bien o suficiente bien en español. Entonces, yo voy a cambiar de lenguaje en inglés. I'm very glad to be here with you today. Don't be depressed, too depressed. There are solutions because my colleague Bernard Monod set up the big picture of the challenges we have to overcome in the coming years for the protection of our planet and for our future. But please, stay calm. There are solutions. And I am here today, I'm very pleased to be here today to present you different data, facts regarding nuclear energy in order to explain a little bit what is the nuclear energy, because most of the time people say, oh my God, it's very complicated. It's dangerous, it's complicated. It's something that we cannot understand. But no, really, it's very simple. And I would like to share with you the different possibilities coming from the use of the nuclear energy. It's not only producing electricity, it's much more than that. So thank you for your invitation. Thank you for being here with us, with my colleague from the UK and Japan as well. We are very glad to be here representing the industry, nuclear industry here. And again, thank you to OPES Oceanie for the invitation. But as I said, let's start with the basics. Few facts and figures. What is the nuclear energy, in fact? I do consider it extraordinary. Yes, this is an extraordinary energy. Okay, it's very simple, I would say. Nuclear energy comes from splitting atoms in a reactor to heat water into steam, turn a turbine, and generate electricity. This is the most common use of the nuclear energy. In order to give you order of magnitude, the first commercial nuclear power plant in the world generating electricity started operation in the 50s. So 60 years ago, roughly, in the world. Today, the nuclear energy provides about 10% of the world's electricity with about 440 power reactors. So roughly 400 power reactors generating 10% of the electricity produced in the world. But as I said, nuclear energy, it's not only generation of electricity, it's much more than that. And it's very important to, and I'm very proud to say that the benefits of nuclear energy extend far beyond carbon-free electricity. Nuclear energy powers exploration, space exploration. Nuclear energy can help the sterilization of medical equipment. It also can provide disease treatment, like the cancer, with the medical sources. It's a very positive action for people. And much more than this, nuclear energy can provide potable water through desalination, fresh water. With a nuclear reactor, you can desalinize your water. You can have access to fresh water or potable water for people. As I said, regarding the research domain for medical treatment, for example, more than 50 countries in the world utilize nuclear energy. In the world, roughly, you have more than 200 research reactors to produce medical sources or sources for industry. But most of the time, they produce medical isotopes for the well-being for people. So you can see that the nuclear energy is much more than generating electricity. But it's amazing, in fact. It's really amazing to see that all power and potential that is coming from a tiny atom. Okay, to give you an order of magnitude, one tiny uranium pellet, 1 inch tail size, it's like this, not more than this. One small pellet like this is the equivalent in terms of energy as 1 ton of coal. It's really crazy. Okay, this is the nuclear energy, but how does a nuclear power reactor, oh, sorry, I can move in the same time, sorry, with the slides. How does work a nuclear power reactor? As I said at the beginning, at first sight it seems to be very complicated to people, but it's very simple. It's like a pressure cooker you can have in your kitchen. It generates steam. The power of nuclear energy generates steam, and it can be obtained from the nuclear fission. So the major part of electricity coming from nuclear power is produced by nuclear fission of uranium and plutonium, fission of this atom. But you have much more possibilities because nuclear power can be obtained from nuclear fission, as I said. You generate steam in that kind of nuclear power plant, and the steam actions the turbines in order to produce electricity. But nuclear power can also be obtained from the nuclear decay and nuclear fusion reactions. But I will be talking about that in a few minutes. Nuclear fusion, this is the future. Few facts, few data in order to set up the scene. You can see there on the graph that the part of the nuclear energy today is a fully fledged player in the energy mix. As you can see, nuclear energy is the fourth source of energy producing electricity. The first one is coal, the second one is gas, but these are considered as fossil fuel. One, they are limited, and two, the most important thing, they do produce CO2. They do release CO2 and greenhouse gases. And it's not considered as very good for the planet, as you know. And this is one of the big challenges we have. How to produce energy in protecting our planet and people. This is the main challenge we have to overcome. So this is the good news. This is the first good news. Nuclear is now the fourth source of energy, of production of energy in the world. Why? It is growing more and more. Okay, first, why do will we need nuclear energy? First, there is an increasing energy demand in the world, for sure. The climate change. The climate change is one of the most important stakes, as I said, for the majority of the countries in the world. But also the security of supply. The security of supply for your country is very important. You don't want to be one day without energy in your country. Can you imagine what can happen in that case? And the economics. Money. Money, the sinews of war. So important. So, the nuclear energy is compliant or is relevant to overcome all these challenges. It's one of the answers. It's not the only answer, but it's one of the answers. Because it's a very steady energy source, and really, this is an insurance against future price exposure. And this is very important now on. I think if you go with your car to the oil station, you can see that the price increase is very worrying. So the nuclear energy is the source of energy, and it's growing and growing, and that's why you can see on that graph the number of reactors in building in the world, especially in China. You can see in China they have many plans of building of reactors, of new build. We call it new build in terms of nuclear power reactor. China is a good example because this is a country with a fast-growing economy and rapidly rising electricity demand. But in the same time, China, like all of other countries in the world, has objectives of CO2 emission reduction and fossil fuel consumption reduction. You have to reduce, we all have to reduce our CO2 emissions and our fossil fuel consumption. Wow, what a challenge. These are the numbers of reactors under construction. But the reactors planned to be built in the future are much higher. We can say that about 400 reactors in the world are on order or planned. But this is it's a growing market everywhere in the world. As I said, why it's needed? The equation is very simple. The United States recently stated that the carbon neutrality by 2050 is the world's most urgent mission. Everything is said. It means that countries need to divide by 2 the CO2 emission in the horizon 2050 in order to limit the temperature increase at a maximum to 1.5%, and in the same time, the electricity demand will be multiplied by 2 in the horizon of 2050. So we will have to divide our CO2 emission by 2, and our electricity demand will be multiplied by 2. This is why you need all the countries in the world need a competitive and low carbon power generation technology, and a technology that operates continuously. I do say that nuclear energy is relevant and is compliant with all these stakes. Which is the situation of the industry now, the nuclear industry? we have a dual challenge to overcome. Okay, as a low-carbon energy source, the nuclear energy is useful in the fight against climate change. That's what I said. You can reduce your CO2 emissions. However, the nuclear power industry is faced with the dual challenge of declining uranium resources and radioactive waste management. Because uranium, like fossil fuel, is not unlimited. So it's very important to be able to reduce the consumption of uranium in our reactors. And that's why the industry, in order to overcome this dual challenge of fighting the climate change and in the same time in not wasting, in earning uranium resource, is researching. They do develop research, and the industry has innovated. Industry constantly innovates. And that's why I would like to give you few examples of the future technologies, or current technology and technologies in the future. What are these generations of reactors? Okay, at first, most of the reactors in the world, the power reactors generating electricity in the world, are what we call generation 2. You can see on TV everywhere, most of the reactors are generation 2. But generation 3 is also now in the market. And generation 3 reactors, they have been designed to succeed generation 2, but they have been designed to bring improvement in terms of fuel technology and thermal efficiency. So the power that the reactor can supply or can provide in terms of energy is higher than generation 2. More than this, in generation 3, the reactors are standardized, much more than for generation 2. And one of the main advantages of the generation 3 is that they have a longer operational life. Generation 2, most of the reactors in the world, have been designed for 40 years, roughly. You can extend the duration of your reactor if you change some components, major components in the reactor, but most of the time it was designed for 40 years. Generation 3 has been designed for more than 60 years, roughly 60 years or more than 60 years. Here on the picture, you can see one of the examples of the third generation reactor, which is named EPR, the European Pressurized Reactor. This is the example of the reactor now in construction in the UK, in Europe. It's an amazing technology. It's a very good technology because this reactor has been designed like most of generation 3 reactor, not only this one, but generation 3 reactors have been designed to use uranium more efficiently than older generation 2. Most of generation 3 reactors use 17% less uranium per unit of electricity generated. So this is what I said. It's very important in terms of innovation, of technology, to be able to reduce the quantity of uranium you use in your reactors. So this third generation enables to reduce the source of uranium. So most of the reactors are generation 2, generation 3 as well. There are main part are under construction in the world. And let's talk about the future. Generation 4. Generation 4 reactors, as you can see on the screen, are a set of nuclear reactors designed, currently being researched We are at the stage of research in the world. In order to work on that future reactor, in order to share the cost and investment, the research is led by a group of countries. Many countries in the world gathered in a forum that we call Foro International Generation, or GIF or GIF. This is the Generation 4 International Forum. In order to give you an example of the countries involved, this is Australia, Canada, China, France, Japan, South Africa, UK, most of the nuclearized countries in the world. And in South America, we have Argentina and Brazil. As I said, this is the next generation. So the main objectives of this group of countries is to enhance again and again the safety, to improve the safety of the reactors and the sustainability efficiency, and for sure the cost. This is one of the main goals. The principal asset of Generation 4 reactor is that the design of this kind of reactor, this is a prototype here, developed in France. The main asset of this reactor is that it works, it operates in a closed fuel cycle. What does it mean? It means that that kind of reactor generates more fissile material than it consumes. So it means that it's roughly unlimited, okay? It generates more fissile material than it consumes. So it means that it generates much less waste, as if we compare with the third generation or the second generation. See, this is a very, very big asset. But it does not exist yet in the market. Experts do estimate that the first commercial plants are not expected before 2040, 2050. But it's on its way. The technology, the research is on its way. Always to reduce the consumption of uranium and in the same time not to produce CO2 emission or reduce the CO2 emission in providing a large amount of energy. I wanted to talk about also a new type of reactor. I think you have heard about that in the world and in the press. It's that what we call the small modular reactors, or SMRs. They are tiny reactors, not so tiny, but much more tiny than the big one, like Generation 2 or Generation 3. They are smaller than conventional nuclear reactors. They, for sure, because they are smaller, they do generate lower energy than bigger reactors. But they have the main advantage of being designed to be manufactured at the plant and transported directly to a site to be installed. That kind of reactor is transportable. This is the kind of reactor that provides flexibility. It's what we call modular. It's flexible. It's lighter. So it means that if you have a need in an industrial site, a big industrial site that needs energy, electricity, for operating the site, it's possible to get that kind of small reactor near the industrial site. It's a very different concept. Smaller, but more flexible, and you can adapt it to your need of energy. To give you the idea about the commercial aspect, one reactor in the world is now connected to the grid since December December 2021, so it's very recent. It's in China. And few others are at the licensing stage in the USA or under construction in China and Russia. So this is the near future compared to generation 4. It's the near future. It does already exist. It does correspond to a need of certain countries, like very vast countries, very wild countries, like Russia, or if you have remote sites in a big country, it's very interesting to have that kind of reactor, or in a very small country, having small need of energy, or smaller need of energy or electricity than big country, it can be adapted to your need. And this is the future. This is the future. The last but not least, the unlimited energy, the power of the sun. Okay, let's forget what I said before. It's a complete break with the current technology. This is really the future. The researchers in the world are working on reproducing the energy of the sun. In a reactor, how do they do? They join together very small nuclei isotopes of hydrogen. Why this technology is unlimited? It is because the hydrogen is the simplest and lightest atom and the most abundant element in the universe. So it's unlimited. The sun is made of hydrogen. A first prototype, that's what I said, reactor, should demonstrate the technical feasibility of this process within the next 15 years. So it's not for tomorrow. This is really at the stage of research. There is a prototype, the only one in the world, in south of France. It's called ITER. ITER. It means International Thermonuclear Reactor. But this is the future, the unlimited access to energy. I hope I have given to you the wish to know more about nuclear energy. The nuclear power energy adventure is on its way. There is hope. And I do hope that my presentation reflected the fact that I'm deeply convinced and I'm deeply confident in the future of the nuclear technologies to reduce the CO2 emission, to limit the effects of the climate change, and one of the most important stakes now on, to protect the future of our planet and the children. Thank you very much.
Agradecemos a la señora Presta. Y en estos momentos presentamos nuestro primer panel, Cambio Climático y las Alternativas de Energías Renovables, que será moderado por el doctor Jorge Eduardo Ritter, ex canciller de la República de Panamá y ex ministro para Asuntos del Canal. En la actualidad es analista en los programas televisivos Mesa de Periodistas y Radar de TVN. Participan nuestros expositores el ingeniero Rebolledo, el señor Bernard Monod y la señora Ampresta, y se nos une al panel el ingeniero Erwin Vargas, director del Centro de Cooperación Tecnológica Marítima para Latinoamérica de la Universidad Marítima de Panamá.
Gracias. How do we do?
Vamos.
¿Sí? Vamos a entrar.
Estamos choosing los.
¿Estamos bien?
¿Sí?
Sí, sí.
Vamos, falta una persona, creo, ¿no?
Sí.
Tendríamos que hacer un espacio más. Bueno.
put it here. It's okay. Thank you.
Aquí va arriba. Ok. Esto. Ahora sí.
Ya.
¿Pero se oye? ¿Sí? ¿No? ¿Sí? ¿No? ¿No?
On
Eh
translation.
ben oui.
¿No se oye?
Non, mais tu l'as,
Sí,
toi.
se escucha.
Sí, se escucha.
Sí se oye, ok. Bueno, yo quisiera comenzar por felicitar a nuestros panelistas. Yo creo que han sido unas magníficas presentaciones, muy didácticas, y cuando digo didácticas es porque yo mismo he estado, como muchos de ustedes, tomando notas por la gran cantidad de información que ellos nos han suministrado. La verdad es que es un lujo el panel que se ha hecho aquí con expertos internacionales, con personas que han venido de Francia, de Gran Bretaña, de Japón, para estar presentes en esta oportunidad única para analizar un tema de tanta actualidad y que se mantiene permanentemente en los medios de comunicación y en la agenda internacional. Yo tomé algunas notas, pero voy a tener que prescindir de ellas porque hay una gran cantidad de preguntas que ustedes son los que han formulado y de verdad que son numerosas, son muy numerosas. Voy a decir demasiado numerosas porque quizás no vayamos a tener el tiempo, así es que de verlas todas, pero voy a tratar de resumir algunas de ellas y les quiero pedir a los panelistas que ellos, como hay algunas preguntas que pudieran abordar cualquiera de los panelistas, aunque hay algunas que sí están específicamente dirigidas a alguno de ellos, les quiero pedir a los panelistas que ellos, el que quiera contestar, o si más de uno quiere contestar la misma pregunta, lo hagan. Voy a comenzar en realidad con la primera que tengo a mano, no voy a hacerlo en ningún orden especial, pero la última presentación, la de Anne, que es la que ha generado una gran cantidad, ellos preguntan cuáles serían los primeros pasos para en realidad, ¿cuál sería? Voy a hacer esto, es una en dos, para un país en vías de desarrollo como Panamá, el uso de energía nuclear. ¿Cuál sería la posibilidad para un país como Panamá para el uso de energía nuclear? Antes, ¿quiere comenzar?
Yeah, muchas gracias por su cuestión, por su pregunta. Yes, this is a very interesting question, and I'm deeply convinced that here for the Panama Canal, the nuclear energy might be a wonderful support to get access to potable water for people and to desalination of water. As Dr. Oyo said, as far as I understood, this is a big stake for you and for the canal now in Panama. So I think there is a good opportunity for Panama and the canal to get access to that kind of reactor, able to generate potable water, and able to not generate directly, but generate the access to the potable water and desalination of maritime water, and in order to give you to the canal fresh water.
Por favor.
Estoy. Realmente también digo, y viéndolo desde el punto de vista que Panamá no fabrica barcos, pues ella sería una respuesta más bien basada en tierra. Hay un paso primordial que habría que dar, que es el de la Ley 6 del 97, que es básicamente normativa, que explícitamente prohíbe el uso de energía nuclear. Así que ese sería un paso importante, porque ahora mismo, viendo cómo ha evolucionado la tecnología, posiblemente se reabre un debate en base a esa normativa que es del 97, basada en una normativa que es aún más antigua. Así que sería como un paso interesante para explorar desde de salida. Ahora que sobre todo ahora se está revisando en el proceso de innovación de la red del país, y sería algo interesante para revisitar.
Bueno, ya que usted ha contestado, ingeniero, voy a saltar una pregunta aquí que le hacen a usted con relación a los cargos que se van a hacer
Sí.
por los tránsitos por el canal, a aquellos buques que contaminan versus los buques que no contaminan. Y la pregunta está formulada en un sentido que si va a haber un sobrecosto para los que contaminan o un descuento para los que no contaminan.
Es un cargo, o sea que partimos desde el punto de vista de que es algo adicional. El que más contamina, pues paga un cargo completo, y a medida que vaya cumpliendo con parámetros de diseño, de maniobrabilidad y de uso de combustibles limpios o de cero emisiones, entonces va disminuyendo en 4 etapas ese cargo, hasta ser cero en el caso de que use un combustible de cero emisiones.
Hay otra pregunta, y esto sí quisiera que a lo mejor varios de ustedes entraran en la respuesta, porque es una pregunta casi especulativa. Ahora mismo, de acuerdo con las cifras que nos han dado, la producción de energía nuclear para la electricidad ocupa el 4º puesto, el 4º lugar, después del carbón, gas, hidro y luego la nuclear. ¿Ustedes prevén en el futuro que esta relación se cambie o se altere y la energía producida, la energía nuclear, ocupe un lugar más importante o más prominente? Bernardo,
No sé si...
como quieran. Si no pueden
bueno,
contestar
todos.
cualquiera. Todos pueden contestar.
Ok, arranco. Yo sí lo veo como algo que se está revisitando. De hecho, se ha revivido mucho el tema de la energía nuclear, basado en los 3 grandes desastres que han habido, pues uno por diseño, otro por mal manejo del personal que manejaba la planta, y otro por un desastre natural. La energía nuclear había salido un poco y de hecho estaba siendo desfasada en algunos de los países, pero al plantear estas metas de reducción de emisiones, no se puede evitar más que volver a evaluar la energía nuclear como una alternativa. Así que sí lo veo creciendo en los países que sí lo decidan adoptar, y la ventaja, digamos, para la energía nuclear es que crece en gigawatts. Así que sí lo veo aumentando como por parte del portafolio hacia la transición energética, dependiendo de la normativa de cada país.
No, y aportando a las palabras de Rubio, una parte importante también hacia eso, a que vaya la energía, es la parte del rol de la educación y el entrenamiento a las personas que van a operar ese tipo de plantas, porque yo creo que es una parte importante para esto. Por lo menos las futuras generaciones que vayan entendiendo cómo llevamos el proceso de una transición energética utilizando energías renovables, energías alternativas, en este caso la energía nuclear, para ese proceso, en qué beneficio nos ayuda, cómo se manejarían esas plantas. Estamos viendo los SMR, que son Small Modular Reactor, cómo podemos activar, cómo podemos implementar esos reactores pequeños que producen una energía suficiente para abastecer un poblado, una ciudad. Entonces, ¿cómo la aplicamos nosotros a las futuras generaciones en el rol de capacitación y entrenamiento para esa persona? Creo que eso es parte importante para poder que la energía a través de reactores nucleares pueda subir. Es uno de los aportes que podríamos decirle.
¿Verdad?
No sé si...
No, pero verdad me ha
Ajá.
pedido que-
Yeah, if I might add something, there is a working group at the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy in Vienna, which is working on the access for small country to nuclear energy. The idea is that nobody could be deprived from any source of energy, and including nuclear. So the nuclear is not just for big countries, and the rest of the world that don't care. But you have a lot of requirement to start to have an efficient nuclear industry. First of all, a lot of countries are starting with a research reactor, which can train the team to access to the biggest nuclear power plants. Then you have to set up a corpus of laws dedicated to this topic, including to sign the non-proliferation treaty or whatever, all the organization. And once you have set up this, then you can access to the next level, which is to build a nuclear power plant if you want to decentralize, if you want to provide electricity, if you want to use for medical purpose or so forth. There is a lot of countries which are on this way. In the region, for example, in Jamaica, they have a research reactor. In Dominican Republic, in Chile, they have one also. And a lot of countries, even in South America, like Brazil, for example, they started with a research reactor, and now they have a fleet of nuclear power plants. So it's possible for countries, every country, to get into the nuclear cycle, but you need a sort of lot of requirement previous to benefit to the advantage of this industry.
And maybe more than this, you're right. I would recommend if you want to get access to this technology, one of the most important things is to be sure that, and that's why you said you or the country has experts or people educated. So I would recommend to invest in the young generation. It's very important for a country to educate the young generation to this technology. So this is the right moment to start this kind of education, I think, in the country. And in order to be able to establish a safety authority in a few years. Because this technology, as you said, is a very special technology. You have to control it. You have to protect people and environment from it, from the nuclear energy, from the nuclear material. So it's very important to understand how it works and how to control it. So even if we can say that having small modular reactors looks like easy, it's something you have to control. So my first recommendation would be invest in the education of your young generation in order to establish rapidly a safety authority, in order to control the activity. This is my main recommendation. With the support, as Bernard said, with the support of the IAEA, which is the agency able to provide you all the support, technical support, legal support, in order to establish that kind of technology in your country. You are not alone if you want to establish that technology, trust me.
Bueno, precisamente sobre ese campo, ahí estoy recogiendo varias de las preguntas al tiempo que de una u otra forma se refieren a la seguridad de estas plantas nucleares. Hay varias preguntas que se relacionan una con la otra. ¿Qué sucede cuando una de estas plantas sale de operación? Citan algunos casos de plantas de energía que han constituido peligros, y yo quisiera que nos ampliaras, Anne, en este caso, Bernard, cuál es una palabra sobre la seguridad de las plantas, y después haré algunas sobre los sitios donde en Panamá pudieran estar ubicadas.
La parte parte de seguridad.
Parte de
Yeah,
seguridad.
I can answer. In fact, yes, you're right. I want to be very transparent. Yes, there were accidents. You're right. This is a technology, as I said, you have to control. But even if it's a human error or technical or environment disaster, sorry, as origin of the accident, in order to mitigate, to be able to mitigate this accident, it's important, I would say, training, and knowledge about the control of this technology. As we have seen, the world had 3 major accidents with the nuclear technology in the US, the first one in Russia, and in Japan. It can happen, but if you have a strong safety authority, if you have people, experts in your country, able to mitigate the accident, able to react, including the first responders, and radiological experts in your country, you can mitigate the accident. This is the key, training, and knowledge about this technology. With, again, the support of the IAEA and the international community of nuclearized countries. It's very important. I'm French, and in France, we do have many relationships with other nuclearized countries, and we do exchange the best practices, our experiences, in order to enhance every day our ability to control, to operate the reactors in our country, and we do train together in order to mitigate an accident in case of.
That's okay. That's good.
¿Ok? Bueno, eso nos lleva un poco también a que como estos reactores, tal como se explicó, requieren de un cuerpo de agua, la pregunta es si hay o ya se ha identificado para el canal alguno de estos sitios, o esto todavía es una tecnología que no ha tenido o que todavía no ha tenido esta...
No la hemos evaluado. El canal en algún momento tuvo una barcaza nuclear, es lo único que recuerdo de la historia de algún tipo de relación con el canal. Nosotros, como lo mencioné en la charla, no somos específicos con una tecnología u otra. Si el país decide pues, ir hacia una investigación, formación en temas nucleares, le tocará al canal obviamente ponerse al día, pero ahora mismo nosotros nos hemos enfocado con energías renovables alternativas, hidroeléctricas, que pues ya es algo que ha sido pues de uso centenario del canal. Y el enfoque es ese, el enfoque es hacia donde está migrando la tecnología, mantenernos al día. Posiblemente Panamá no es un país que tenga grandes avances en el tema, así que realmente para el canal no lo hemos tomado en cuenta realmente como parte de nuestra investigación, porque por ahora no ha sido parte del portafolio del país.
Y en general para el país tampoco, entonces no. Por
Ahora,
parte de otras agencias del...
O sea, yo honestamente no he escuchado un movimiento hacia el tema nuclear. No sé cuáles son las razones. En el momento en el que se hizo la ley, la que mencioné, de la ley C del 97, por alguna razón se especifica esa prohibición. O sea, que sí debe haber habido en algún momento una discusión a nivel nacional, pero creo que no ha vuelto a tocarse el tema, al menos no que yo sepa.
Y en cuanto a las energías del futuro, ¿hay alguna distinta, y esta sí sería para todos, distinta de la energía nuclear que acabamos de ver y que Panamá todavía no ha avanzado en esa materia? ¿Cuál sería para Panamá la principal o hacia dónde debiera enfocarse, dice aquí, la estrategia de Panamá en esta materia?
En energías, vamos a decir, de fuentes renovables,
Sí.
solar siempre es una tremenda opción. Es una tecnología que ya está a una escala lo suficientemente mundial o pues altamente distribuida como para que sea inclusive fabricada ya en diferentes lugares distintos a los que eran los originales. Solar siempre es una alternativa, eólico es una alternativa, pero todas mareomotriz, es algo un poquito más emergente que no está tan consolidado. Pero todas las tecnologías de fuentes renovables generalmente vienen con la desventaja de que son, vamos a decir que periódicas, no están con una frecuencia garantizada, y de hecho ahora mismo el mercado eléctrico de Panamá no les declara una potencia firme. Una de las cosas que sí que estamos explorando es el tema del almacenamiento. Parte del almacenamiento es casualmente lo que mencionaba pues, durante la charla, que es estas moléculas del futuro presente realmente, hidrógeno, amonia, es una forma de almacenamiento de energía renovable, ya que utilizas la energía que te sobra para romper una molécula en pues, oxígeno e hidrógeno en este caso. Está la tecnología de baterías, o sea, realmente ahora mismo yo creo que las energías renovables están consolidadas como fuente de energía. Lo que nos hace falta es estabilizar y poder garantizar el suministro durante periodos en los que no tenemos esa generación. Así que es esa combinación de generación y almacenamiento.
Y con relación a la transición hacia los vehículos eléctricos, que es lo que preguntan que si ha habido, yo sé que esta pregunta quizás no es para ninguno, pero es una inquietud de que si esa visión se ha compartido con otras instituciones del Estado panameño para que no fuera digamos, el canal solamente el que lo
Sí, que casualmente
puede
pregunta
contestar
creo
también.
que a la persona adecuada. Sí hay una comunicación con el resto de las entidades. Actualmente el Canal de Panamá sí está haciendo una transición de pronto un poco más agresiva que la ley que salió recientemente, muchos la habrán escuchado. Es una ley que plantea una intención de país de hacer una transición a movilidad eléctrica, y sí tenemos una comunicación a través de la Secretaría de Energía para compartir mejores prácticas de todas las instituciones. Si esas mejores prácticas vienen del canal o vienen de otra institución es realmente irrelevante, porque al final la intención es que haya una transición a nivel nacional. Sí tenemos un plan en el canal, y obviamente tiene que darse varios parámetros a lo interno de nuestro funcionamiento. La ventaja es que nuestra red es nuestra red eléctrica, así que las modificaciones que hagan falta pues, se podrán hacer. Igualmente se tendrá que revisar a nivel de país, pero sí, la transición se está dando de una manera bastante compartida. Tuvo una baja del esfuerzo que empezó en el 2018 por la pandemia, pero sí se está retomando el esfuerzo, y ahora mismo creo que todos lo están viendo en los medios, que hay un surgimiento fuerte de cantidad de modelos, así que sí se prevé una transición. Lo que necesitamos hacer es que sea una transición informada y decidida por nosotros y no forzada por el mercado.
Hay una inquietud que también se refleja en varias de las preguntas, que guarda alguna relación con el costo, que yo sé que no vamos a entrar aquí en cuánto cuesta uno de estos reactores nucleares, pero sí creo que no tienes esa información, pero sí guarda relación con el hecho de que si esto puede contribuir a ampliar la brecha entre los países que tienen la capacidad de producir estos reactores versus aquellos países en vías de desarrollo que no tienen esa posibilidad. O sea que la brecha en calidad de vida en un ambiente más sano, mejor calidad de vida entre los países que tienen la capacidad de producir energía nuclear versus los que no tienen, incluido Panamá, dice aquí. Los que no tienen la posibilidad. Sí, sí.
About the cost of the nuclear power, I think that the best opponent, the biggest opponent to nuclear energy is not a green party. It's a chief financial officer of a utility. because if you give to him the choice between a coal-fired plant, which costs 500 millions of dollars and for 20 years, and the cost of a nuclear power plant, which costs 5 billions of dollars, but which will list, which operate during 15 years, he is going to choose the coal system, because on his revenue, it's the best option. And whenever there is no carbon tax to take into account that the coal technology is releasing CO2 in the atmosphere, the nuclear industry will have a problem with the financing. And the amount of money is huge, but it's on a long-term investment, and for people who are thinking on the few years of revenues, it's not the good solution. So that's the problem with financing the nuclear. As far as we come back to the regional organization, maybe we can think to share the burden of building a nuclear power plant between, I don't know, many states around the country, Costa Rica, Panama, or other countries, to share the burden and to share the electricity between themselves. It would be an option. And we have seen this in Europe as well, where some countries want to build a nuclear power plant with other countries and then share the electricity and share the drawbacks, by the way.
Yes, I agree. I think it's for smaller countries, or it's important to think about the region itself and not the country only. I think it's very important in order to share the cost, or to invest in one country and sell the energy to the others. I think it's much more relevant to think like that. In terms, if you do imagine having a source of energy, a source of nuclear energy in the region. This is one of the key factors of success, I think, in that kind of region. Yes, it's expensive, but I think that what I presented is, I wanted to say that there are tailor-made solutions now in terms of nuclear energy, really adapted to your need. So everything starts with the dialogue in order to well understand what is your need and in order to provide the best solution. But I do think that it's very important to change the way of thinking and think about the region in order to get access to this kind of energy, and not only one country plus another country, and so on.
And if I can make another comment on the electric vehicles you were talking about. So there is a trend now to transform all the world automotive fleet into an electrical fleet. In our opinion, a car which is powered by electricity coming from coal is not an electric car, it's a coal-powered car. Or if the electricity comes from nuclear, it's a nuclear-powered car. So it's a sort of problem that people are telling the audience that the electrical vehicle are the solution. Okay, maybe, but who is providing electricity at first? And that is the question. It's not only the end product, but how to produce electricity to provide power to the cars.
Sí, y tiene razón, al final hay una diferencia igual en eficiencia en el sentido de que si se tiene un vehículo que, como lo mencionaba el compañero, de que si se tiene un vehículo que la red está a base de carbón, por eficiencia igual se reducen menos emisiones, pero el objetivo nunca debe ser pasar a vehículos eléctricos sin hacer una descarbonización de la red. Y creo que en Panamá y las empresas que estamos basados en la región en general, el enfoque es en ambas direcciones, por suerte. En base a lo que mencionaba a nivel de región, no iba a decir nada, pero ya que empecé a hablar, tenemos una interconexión hasta Guatemala en este momento. Cualquiera de los países en el camino que decida hacer una transición a un tipo de energía diferente puede vender energía más barata por esa interconexión a través del mercado eléctrico. O sea que sí haría una disrupción cualquiera de los que tomen una decisión en esa dirección a nivel regional. O sea que sí debería ser una decisión posiblemente que sea consultada a través de los mecanismos que existen a nivel
regional. Exacto.
Yeah.
Bueno, yo iba a hacer un aporte y gracias.
Por favor.
Sí, una de las cosas que tenemos que tener claro, hay energías que son energías renovables, como ya las he mencionado, y energías alternativas. Cuando hablamos de energías alternativas, nos estamos refiriendo a hidrógeno, a amonia, ¿sí? Exactamente. ¿Cómo esas energías alternativas podemos llevarlas a que pasen de ser alternativas a producción? Pero, ¿qué pasa? Tenemos que tener en el mercado gran cantidad almacenada para poder pensar en eso. Por lo menos en Panamá, en el sector marítimo, se está pensando en realizar una comisión de alto nivel nacional para la sostenibilidad del transporte marítimo. Eso es política de país que tenemos que pensar ya nosotros como Panamá, cómo podemos pensar hacia ese futuro y cuál va a ser nuestra política, a qué energía alternativa o energía renovable al sector del transporte marítimo vamos orientada. Y esas tienen que ir de acuerdo a lo que establece la Organización Marítima Internacional, que son esas energías enfocadas a la distribución, al almacenamiento y a su uso. En este caso, al uso de los buques, en este caso, a la flota. Hacia allá tenemos que ir enfocando entonces nosotros como política panameña de un transporte sostenible.
Yo quisiera, por mi parte, señalar que el aporte que se ha hecho hoy, voy a seguir luego con algunas preguntas, es que el aporte que Panamá está haciendo al cambio climático o a la problemática, cómo Panamá ha abordado, o el Canal de Panamá en este caso, ha abordado los retos del cambio climático, de no solamente señalarlo como un problema o como un tema que atender, sino el solo hecho de hablar ya de una carbono neutro para el año 30 o la descarbonización para el año 2050 es realmente pensar en el futuro, pensar no en lo inmediato, no en el día a día de cuánto va a producir y cuántos barcos o cuántos buques van a transitar el canal, sino lo que significa para el país y para el mundo lo que Panamá está aportando. Hay algunas preguntas y yo no quisiera, yo las voy a presentar de todas maneras para nuestros panelistas, pero realmente que están referidas a los reactores nucleares como si fueran inminente su instalación en Panamá, cosa que ya hemos explicado que no lo es. Y hay algunas preguntas muy concretas de qué pasa después de los 60 años. Se ve que son jóvenes que van a vivir más de 60 años. Yo no. ¿Qué pasa después de los 60 años con estas plantas y qué pasa con los desechos y las partículas de uranio que quedan? Cosa que después que termina la vida útil, le voy a hacer la pregunta para satisfacer la curiosidad de alguno de los estudiantes, para qué sucede después con los reactores una vez que han terminado su vida útil. O sea, ya después que hice en la presentación, dijiste 60 años, ¿qué pasa después de los 60 años?
This is a good question. The generation 2 is the main generation of reactors now on in the world. So they were designed for 40 years lifetime, but they have been extended thanks to the safety authorities in the world. These designs of generation 2 have been extended to 50 or almost 60 years. But there is an end. Even if you can extend the life duration of your reactor, there is an end. And in Europe, in the US, in Russia also, they were pioneers in terms related to this technology. So we do leave the stage of dismantling operations. So we do have the experience. We do We are working on it now, the dismantling operation. We dismantle the different power reactors. So after the lifetime of your reactor, you have to dismantle it to manage the waste. This is a question. And this is a question, this is a challenge most of European countries or nuclearized countries in the world have to face now on. But again, there are solutions. Some countries are very well advanced in that treatment and management of waste. And I'm very confident in the technology and in the science in order to reduce as much as possible the amount of waste generated by the nuclear technology, because it's true, you generate waste, but you generate waste as you can generate in your kitchen or in your life. But the big question is how to treat, how to manage it, because it's very dangerous. The waste are very dangerous. And again, the key factor of success is knowledge, training, education, in order to control the waste. But there are solutions. We do have solutions because we do live this phase of dismantling operations, now one in Europe, in the US, or in Russia. So for sure, this is an experience we can share with the newcomers, with the country as newcomers in the market.
Yes, indeed, it's just a matter of money. And in the bill for the consumers, you have a line for the decommissioning. So there is a budget to do that operations. And once the power plant is stopped, and once the nuclear materials are gone to the decommissioning or to a repository, then afterwards it's just a public work business, to dismantle concrete and all the equipment inside the reactor. But you need to take into account the cost when you are building the reactor.
And most of the time in the world, the nuclearized countries have included the cost of dismantling operation in the cost of the electricity price. So this is the main scheme, in fact, in the world. This is something you have to take into account when you sell the electricity or the energy in your country coming from the reactors. You have to include the amount, this investment in terms of dismantling operation in 60 or more than 60 years.
You will have the same question for solar panel or for windmills, because after 20 years of exploitation, now you have a field of windmills or solar panel who is going to take into account the decommissioning of these equipments. For the moment, it's not really clear.
No, aplica para todas las tecnologías, pienso. La segunda vida o la reutilización o reciclaje de cualquier planta de generación de cualquier tipo realmente tiene que estar al momento de iniciar, como lo menciona, a menos que sea un piloto y de pronto entonces parte del experimento es la desmantelación. Posiblemente no quieres hacer eso con una tecnología con algún tipo de hazard, pero sí, sí se tiene que hacer bajo los parámetros más seguros. Por ejemplo, uno de los cuestionamientos que hubo, ¿qué hacemos con las baterías de los vehículos eléctricos una vez cuando termina su vida útil? Realmente las baterías, cuando llegan a unos 10, 12 años, llegan a una utilización, una reducción en su capacidad de como un 80%. Se les puede dar una segunda vida en aplicaciones estacionarias, como backups de edificios. O sea, hay que pensar en la transición y lo que viene después. Es una planificación a la que posiblemente no estamos acostumbrados como un país joven, pero podemos aprender de mejores prácticas y realmente planificar a largo plazo no solamente lo que se va a hacer para resolver el problema de hoy, sino permitirle a las generaciones futuras de resolver los problemas de ellos más adelante. Es parte de este pensamiento de trazar metas a largo plazo. No es resolvernos hoy y después pues como que las generaciones que vienen que vean qué hacen, es tratar de dejar el camino preparado, cerrar las brechas de capacitación, cerrar las brechas de conocimiento que haya para cualquier tecnología que sea la que surja para poder solucionar este reto que realmente es a nivel global, me refiero al cambio climático, y afrontarlo pues de la manera más educada posible a la que podemos llegar hoy.
Voy a hacer una referencia a los retrofit. Como todos sabrán, tenemos motores en los buques, usamos motores de combustión interna, comúnmente motores de 2 tiempos. Ya esos motores pensamos que no van a poder ser útiles más porque vamos a cambiar a nuevos. Bueno, esos motores, haciendo un retrofit, esos motores utilizando combustibles alternativos, son funcionales igualmente. ¿Cómo así? Adaptándole su sistema, ¿sí?, de inyección de combustible a través del ciclo Otto, de pasarlo a un ciclo Otto, a un ciclo diésel. Esa es la parte de capacitación. Entonces, ¿cómo utilizamos esa misma tecnología, aplicarla para mejorarla a través de tecnologías alternativas? En este caso, hoy en día ya podemos ver que MAN, uno de los fabricantes de motores, ya tiene este tipo de motores funcionando. Motores de combustión interna, 2 tiempos, que queman combustibles pesados, ya están quemando combustibles alternativos aplicados a bordo de los buques. Entonces, esa es una de las alternativas que podemos ir pensando, haciendo un retrofit, que no necesariamente tenemos que eliminar o dejar de existir, sino que pueden seguir modificándolos y adecuándolos con las nuevas tecnologías.
Voy a hacer la última pregunta al ingeniero Rebolledo, porque se refiere al proceso que llamó mucho la atención, el proceso que nos va a llevar al carbono neutral en el 30 y a la descarbonización en el año 50, que si hay metas, pregunta por las metas medibles año a año para llegar, o mientras llegamos a esa,
Sí.
a esa parte.
Una de las cosas que estamos haciendo es estableciendo un inventario certificado, o sea, que es verificable, es medible y vamos a reportar. Justamente la reducción, estableciendo metas específicas para diferentes, llamémoslo sectores de las áreas que vamos a descarbonizar, y la idea es establecer indicadores específicos. No es, porque cuando, y esto bueno, a nivel corporativo, cuando tú dices creemos indicadores, creas 200 indicadores, la idea es enfocarnos en los que de verdad nos repercuten y los que nos marcan una diferencia, y seguirlos y reforzar su cumplimiento, porque si no lo hacemos de esa manera vamos a llegar a esas metas de esos años y no vamos a tener una certeza de realmente dónde estamos parados. Tenemos que hacerlo y eso es el trabajo que estamos haciendo en este año fiscal 2022 y el año fiscal 2023, sentando esas bases sólidas para poder entonces hacer la transición bien medida, bien reportada, con una transparencia que siempre, como lo dije, caracteriza al Canal de Panamá, y nosotros es algo que no vamos a movernos hacia adelante si no tenemos esa transparencia de por medio.
Voy a hacer una última referencia, que ya no es una pregunta, sino en realidad, a transmitir una felicitación personal a ustedes. Lo haré después con respecto a los panelistas, pero con respecto a ustedes, por una circunstancia que les va a parecer a ustedes quizás tonta, pero que yo me fijo mucho en eso. Todas las veces que me ha tocado a mí moderar paneles de esta naturaleza y se reciben preguntas por escritas, hay con unas faltas de ortografía que dan ganas de llorar. Sin embargo, los he revisado todas, una por una, y no he encontrado ni una sola falta de ortografía en ninguna de las preguntas que se han hecho, que me parece que dice muy bien de ustedes y dice muy bien de la universidad. Se los digo porque he estado tratando incluso con profesionales que formulan unas preguntas casi ininteligibles.
Bravo.
Y por último, quiero agradecerles a los panelistas, especialmente a los que nos han visitado, que han hecho un viaje especial a Panamá para compartir con nosotros sus conocimientos, sus experiencias, sus inquietudes, que hayan sido tan abiertos y que nos hayan ayudado a todos a abrir los ojos sobre la realidad que estamos viviendo. Ha sido un lujo tenerlos a ustedes y les agradezco muchísimo su participación.
Thank you very much.
Un placer para
Muchas gracias.
Thank you.
Agradecemos al doctor Ritter y a todos nuestros panelistas. Muchísimas gracias por acompañarnos esta mañana. Y bueno, es momento del almuerzo. Invitamos a todos los asistentes a pasar al buffet que tenemos para ustedes fuera del salón y pueden regresar a sus asientos para tomar su almuerzo. Buen provecho y nos vemos en una hora.